Hello, every morning, every happy Wednesday to be welcome again to FB Live series. Although we are doing this now a little bit lesser due to a lot of people are back to work, but I think this is a very important topic that we should talk and discuss about. So this morning we have Madam Sutapa from TNB this morning. Madam, would you like to say a few words to our viewers this morning before we start?
Good morning, everybody. I'm so glad to be on this FB Live. Thank you, Dr. Lawrence, for arranging this. The topic I'm going to be talking about, I'm not sure that most of you have heard of this topic, but I think it's very important for most of us to know about it. It's something that I think will have a great impact on our lives in the coming future. And I think it's something that I would like to talk about. And of course, I'm happy to discuss even further after this. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Madam Stopa. To all our friends, I think let's give it a bit of time while people start to come in. But when you come in, please say along the way. Feel free to also ask questions, and I will address your questions to Madam directly. Before we go to this very topic about energy transition, which I actually just honestly and openly admitted to our guest speaker today that I actually have no clue as well of this specific topic about energy transition. But before we go into that, Madam Stopa, whether you want to tell us what do you do in TNB?
Sorry, excuse me, I didn't get the question fully.
Yeah, what do you do in TNB? What role
What
do
do
you
I
play?
do in TNB?
Yes.
Okay, so I am working in group corporate communication. So, which basically means in terms of strategic communication, how do we communicate with all our public, our customers? We have different stakeholders like the media. We have the regulators, Tenaga, Energy Commission. How do we communicate with these different people? How do we brand our products and services? Increasingly, we are going to start we're going into retail and offering products and services, which are related to this topic. Actually, I will talk a little bit about those things a little later. In terms of energy management, energy efficiency, most people don't know. Most of you know TNB as the lights which you turn on and utility. But actually, we do far more than that. And it's quite a complicated business. Because we're into power generation, we're into power distribution, and we're into the retail that goes to your homes. So my job is pretty much that: branding, strategic communication, also internal communication. A lot of you are not aware, I understand, that internal communication for a company as big as TNB's, which is 36,000 employees, is extremely important. How do you we can't even get 5 people in the same room to agree on things, and to have 36,000 employees move in a certain direction. We are moving towards this goal. This is what we want to do. It's quite challenging, but we're working on it. And as Dr. Lawrence would know, and I hope some of you would know, TNB is also transforming itself. So we have a strategy called Reimagining TNB, which we're following. And the idea is to become more progressive and stay relevant in the future. Most of you would not know, but you know how the whole industry itself is going through an evolution right now and under crisis. And this is something which has happened also to the energy industry across the world. And so we are preparing ourselves for that to happen as we move along.
Yeah.
But again, like I said, please feel free to ask questions if you're interested, because it's quite an exciting. When I joined 2.5 years ago, I joined because I thought it's a really exciting sector to be in. It's a sunrise sector, so to speak.
Sure. So I think thank you so much, Madam, for that very short introduction. But not only about reimagining TNB, which I saw there was some recent launch, right? I see by your CEO and your team, but also I think being a very responsible company as well, very socially driven. I think my point is we had the honor to work with TNB on certain programs for our young people.
Yes.
Very commendable, not just about making money, but as well as. So let's get into the very first question that personally I will also want to ask. What does energy transition means?
So, as you know, most of energy that is produced today, or electricity, or power, or whatever you want to call it, is usually based on a whole sector which is based on fossil-based fuel. So it's coal as such. A, because at one point of time it's plentiful, and also it's cheaper in comparison. Energy transition is the pathway towards transforming that sector from being fossil based to zero carbon. And the goal is to do this by the second half of the century. So, as a part of this transition, two things are extremely important. One is renewable energy. How do we move from the sector, which is entirely fossil based, to a zero carbon or renewable energy kind of based system? And that, I think, is more difficult than most people realize it is. So, a lot of people will say, why don't you become renewable right now? It's not so easy because everything around us, I mean, we can become more renewable energy. We can use that as an energy sector. But there are many, many industries which are dependent on fuel and fossil fuels. For example, the transport industry, the heavy industry, the steel industry, etc. And the another part of this is actually energy efficiency. It has been found that if you look at renewable energy and energy efficiency measures, together these two can potentially achieve up to 90% of the required carbon reductions. So this is actually basically the push towards a carbon neutral economy through energy transition. So it actually entails supply of energy, demand of energy, restructuring the sector itself, and how individuals too have a role to play. So it actually moves from being producing heat and power in small cogeneration units to avoiding the replacing overproduction and saving on energy. There are a lot of inefficiencies also in a generation. How do we make it more efficient? How do we use more energy saving measures? So basically, that is what it is. How do we democratize energy towards more increased sustainability? Just now you mentioned, Dr. Lawrence, about sustainability. I would, if any of you have read about our new launch of culture, you would notice that this time TNB, has been for 70 years. Actually, we've been powering the nation, yes, and lighting up homes, keeping the lights on. But also, we've been doing a lot for people itself. People think a lot of sustainability is just about environment, but actually, it's far more than that. It's also about helping the poor, helping the needy, etc. Some things that we've been doing. We've also been doing work in the area of environment, like the Kelep sanctuary that we have. We have the mangrove planting. But when you do energy transition, actually is also moving towards increased sustainability. In our purpose itself this time, we have actually put our stake in the ground and putting our mouth where our money is and saying that, yeah, we are going to stand for sustainability. So moving forward, we have actually pledged that we will not go into coal anymore. All our power plants from now will be renewable energy based.
I think this is very interesting discussion here about sustainability, talking about the future. But this is the next question that is actually out of the list that I really am very keen to find out, because I think we have read numerous data, numerous news about how how are we moving forward in terms of preserving the planet and etc. So actually, where are we at the moment in terms of like you said, maybe sustainability is are we actually progressing to what we are heading to, or we are actually not progressing? Actually, we are doing not so well in terms of sustainability, preserving environment, renewable energy, etc.
Okay, so that's a very difficult question. I think it's linked to another question, which is in the scope. Most people actually don't understand sustainability, like I mentioned, and
Yeah.
I think Asians particularly are rather guilty of that. And I would suppose also because we're developing economies, we have other issues which are more urgent, I would believe. Poverty alleviation, job creation, etc. So I think that's why the sustainability issue tends to be overlooked. And particularly in a country like Malaysia, I think we should all be very, very lucky. We live in one of the oldest rainforests of the world. I don't know how many people know that. The Amazon rainforest is the biggest, but we are the oldest in Malaysia. And we have 250, medicinal herbs that come from here. Having said that, though, I think that is the kind of complacency. People really don't understand sustainability that much. They think just, grow a plant a tree, and that's enough. Actually, it's not enough. Because when you plant a tree, somebody has to take care of that plant to make sure it survives. 50% of the plants that you actually plant, those trees, they actually die without any,
Correct.
sustainability. So what we actually do is when we do mangrove planting or whatever, we actually engage the communities around it to make sure that they understand the importance of sustaining this and continuing. That is sustainability, to do something long term. But coming back to what you mentioned, where are we on this? How do you evaluate Malaysia's progress? Well, one thing I think we can talk about is the fact that we are the sixth in the world in terms of solar manufacturing employers. We employ we have about 250 companies across the value chain, which provide about 54,000 jobs. So as it is, you can see. So in some respect, we're moving forward, but still nascent. We also, as you know, the government has put a target of 45% reduction as per the Paris Agreement. Carbon reduction is something that we've pledged towards. I think we're still quite far from there. We've also pledged to have 20% renewable by 2025. But, if you look at a country like the UK, it has taken them 40 years, to come from fossil fuel to carbon neutral. It takes time. It takes time because it means that you need to have more electrical vehicles on the road. It means that you need to go into more renewable. And renewable one, some of the challenges are the pricing is a challenge, although prices have gone down a whole lot in the last few years. And electric vehicles require charging stations. So, it's like a chicken and egg to some extent, and you also need storage batteries. So I will talk a little bit more about the challenges as I go along. But I think this is good to know that, yes, in Malaysians have started moving to nut straw and things like that. But, but they still need to go into a little bit more of what the Europeans do, because they are prepared to pay a slight price for renewable and sustainability's sake.
Understood. Thank you so much for the explanation. So I got your conclusion. We have done into this. What do we actually need in energy transition? Why do we need this?
Yeah, I think that's the more important question to actually ask ourselves. Why do we need energy transition?
Yeah.
I think we need to understand that, one of the things we found is it is air pollution itself. Dirty air is killing 570,000 children under the age of 5 every year. If you've been noticing around you, more and more people are having breathing problems. Even children have asthma, etc. Right?
Yes.
More than and this is causing more death than any other single cause, including unsafe drinking water, malaria, etc. We've also found conditions like asthma, reduced lung capacity, has an impact on the brain and development. So they've been the air pollution with fossil fuels is actually very toxic.
Yeah.
So that has been one of the main things. And doctors are now stating that, the particulate air pollution is like lead pollution. So there is no safe threshold. One of the biggest polluters is actually the source is traffic, which is the urban air pollution. A lot of people on the roads, as you know. If you remember, China actually banned traffic on certain days, and they achieved a huge difference. The other thing I think is that, if you look at this, some people have, so sustainability sometimes people say is a rich man's thing. And it's you can afford to be sustainable if you are rich, which is not really true either. The other thing I think is you will notice, I'm sure you've heard the climate change is happening, temperatures are rising. There are more forest fires, there are more floods, there are more hurricanes. What is the reason of all of this? This is really due to the fact of sustainability of the nature. Nature is telling you something. It's giving you a message. Even though there are certain people in certain countries who refuse to believe that there's such thing as a climate change, right?
Oh.
But yes, dear Mr. President Trump in the States claimed that there's no climate change. Actually, what you'll also find is the glaciers in the North Pole and the South Pole are actually decreasing, which basically means, which is why the water level is rising, which is going to lead to more floods in the future, which will also, the impact is not just about this. It's also the coastal cities. If you've read The Inconvenient Truth, if any of you have seen the film by Al Gore, which he made quite a few years ago, when he said certain countries would be submerged after a few years, right? So we're actually seeing that the temperature has not risen by 1.5, it's actually risen by even more, 2 centigrade. So, heat waves are 40% longer, heavy rainfall is 40% higher, etc. We're losing our coral reefs at a tremendous rate. And what does this mean for us? That means crop yields also are going to go down. Sea levels are rising, corals are going down, crop yields are reducing, whether it's wheat, maize, soya, rice, which basically means we're moving towards food scarcity.
Yeah.
So people think of sustainability as only as the environment. No, guys, it's going to affect everything. It's going to affect
Yeah.
life. It's going to affect health. It's going to affect food. It's going to affect
Food.
industry. So it's
Correct.
actually quite damaging, the potential damage that we are putting into the atmosphere. And for the future generation, what does that mean for them? So I think these are some of the things that we need to think about. What is the cost of global warming? It'll cost of global warming to world emissions will cost 25 to 30 trillion dollars by 2050 in terms of healthcare, in terms of food, etc. And it also increases energy prices, economic, social instability. When people will start fighting over fuel, will start
Correct.
fighting because fossil fuels are decreasing, and food price will go up. So
Correct.
these are the kind of things that you need to understand.
Yeah. Before we go to the next question about the driving factor, with all this information that you are giving to us, of course, I hope that our viewers and in the future, when this video is going to go public, people will get more knowledge about this. But, Madam, what is your take on, how much do actually people know about all these things? I mean, of course, knowledge and information are readily available on YouTube's, on Google's, or everywhere. But what is your take on this? How many actually are Malaysians or even the general public knows about all these things?
I think most people don't actually know. Like I
Yeah,
mentioned before, I mean, if at all they think about, well, like I said, there's some people who don't believe in global warming, and some people, think that it's just about becoming carbon free. So they don't really understand the challenges. I think you need to understand the challenges to understand the issues, really. And I don't think people go into that depth. So energy transition actually has to balance between these three factors. So while we want to get into energy efficiency, energy transition, we need one thing which is about security. Okay,
mm,
so we must make sure that the security of energy is not compromised,
yes,
because that is a very crucial factor, right, in terms of a country's security. That is something that we need to keep in mind. How secure is it? Therefore, again, I think people don't realize you need to keep investing in energy sector to make sure that the reliability, because more and more people are actually getting onto the grid. More and more people are looking for electricity. I don't know, because in Malaysia we don't realize it, because in Malaysia we're 99% access to electricity. There's just 1% orang asli villages, etc. But across the world, there are many people who actually don't have energy, which basically means more emissions, more things coming out. So how do I manage access to affordable energy along with security, along with economic growth? Actually, at the end of the day, people will accept these renewable changes in the sector, in the energy sector, if I can promise them economic growth. That is the key thing. I need to make sure that I balance, when I do this energy transition, I balance all of this, because I'm moving from one kind of structure to another kind of structure. So how do I maintain sustainability? How do I, get security and access to energy with economic growth? Now that I think is, most people, I don't think understand that. It's very complicated for us as ourselves as such. So you can imagine. And like I mentioned before, particularly in Malaysia, I think right now with the COVID, etc. Also, there are so many other things to think about, right?
yes.
We're in a period of transition, jobs, and food on the table, etc. So this is the last thing that on people's minds. I think that's where we are at this point.
Understood. So you mentioned, Madam, you mentioned about the growth of economy, which is also part of this factor.
Sorry, I didn't hear your question.
Yeah, you mentioned, Madam, about about economy factor as well. So how does
Yes.
energy transition help in the growth of economy?
Okay, yes. So, what has been found in certain reports, we have found that doubling the share of renewables by 2030 would actually bring a range of positive impact in terms of increase in global gross product, domestic product, up to 1.1%, improvement of global welfare by 3.7%, and actually, more importantly, many more jobs. 24 million people working in the renewable energy sector. So it shows if we could mitigate the climate change and deploy more of renewable energy, more other socioeconomic objectives would also be achieved. So what we actually find is that's why you notice that we have things like, we would have solar PV manufacturers, installers. We would have more jobs for them. Those are the kind of jobs we're expecting. Electric car manufacturers. Then you have the stations, charging stations for that. Then you have the energy managers, energy audit. We'd have those people. Then one thing that I would like to mention is battery storage is actually linked to renewable energy. Because there are some challenges, which I suppose you'll ask me later, so I will speak about it at that point of time.
Yes, definitely.
But battery storage is another one of the other industries that we will see opening up as we go along. Plus, of course, if you think about it, because you have renewable energy and less of the health problems, food problems, etc., you would expect also in the future going forward to be higher productivity and more savings for the economy. So that's kind of how we would grow the economy. There are many more jobs. People often think that, okay, if we close all this down, then we would not have jobs. What will happen to the economy? No, that won't really happen. As we transition, we will have other things that will open up. It might probably require some reskilling and retraining, but yes, there are potentially many, many other jobs out there.
I think this is very, very good to hear about all these things. People read this reskilling as well. To ensure, in order to ensure energy transitions move forward, is it just the hardware that we are looking at? I mean, when we are talking about maybe new technology that is involved, new manpower, new knowledge. So, what are some of the driving factors on current energy transition processes? For example, are we just looking at upgrading our hardwares, or there are some combination of things that needs to be looked into to ensure the process of this transition, is actually successful?
I think that's a good point. So it's not just about the hardware. Of course, we need the solar panels, we need other factors we have, the storage, batteries, etc., which we don't have at this point of time, the charging stations. That's a very good point. Actually, it's also about people. Otherwise, we just have the two things there, but people don't know how to use it right.
Correct.
And I think I'd like to also mention this point of time, there's not just about this, even smart meters that we're rolling out, is also part of this transition, actually. Because what the smart meter does, like I said, there are two parts to this. One is renewable energy, right? So you have renewable energy, you have solar PV manufacturers, you have solar farms, etc., and you need to have people who know this technology. So we need to build people and train people to do those things. You need people to manufacture, you need people to install, you need people to maintain after that. So there's a whole value chain for renewables itself. Then we get into the energy efficiency part of it. Energy management. So a lot of industries right now are complaining because it's, the energy prices, well, the energy prices haven't really gone out, but there's more, it's expensive. How do I manage my costs? Because other costs have actually gone up. So therefore, again, we really have, there's tools to actually manage your energy and how to do manage your energy management. So if you go in the future, I think you'll find more energy managers who will be helping to audit, energy auditors, those kind of people will also have to be trained, you see. And the last one I'd like to also say is, you may have heard that smart meters have been rolling out in Klang Valley after Malacca. So that also the reason for that actually is also not just in terms of upgrading, but also it allows people to have the ability to manage their own energy. Because you can actually check your energy usage every 30 minutes, every 1 hour, hourly. So that also puts a lot of control into your hands. Again, going back into energy efficiency and managing your bills and managing your energy consumption, which again goes back into, so for those, we have smart meter installers, we have smart meter manufacturers. So there's a lot of these jobs, and as you rightly said, it's not just the hardware, it's also making sure that people can actually use these. So there's a lot more that's happening here.
Yes. I remember the previous interview with your colleagues rolling out the smart meter. Yes,
right.
and of course, you started off with Malacca, and now soon enough with all the schedules coming up in Klang Valleys and the houses around here. This is exactly the next question that I will really like to ask. I think COVID-19 has impacted a lot of people. In fact, all the people. And actually, for example, smart meter was also delayed, right, in deploying into our consumers' home and etc. So, how does COVID-19 impact on Madam?
Sorry, I missed the
Yes.
last part, Dr. Lawrence.
Yeah.
Missed the
So
last part.
what are the impacts of COVID-19 over energy transition?
So I think all of you would have read by now that as per the International Energy Agency, they expect greenhouse emissions to reduce by 8% in 2020. So, which is good, which is good. I think we've also noticed that health has got better for a lot of people. I mean, not the mental stress, but the rest of it. But it is still challenging. We can't forget about it. What has happened, I would say. So yes, I mean it's a good thing that happened, not because it's. I mean we have all the other painful parts to it, but yes, it's declined because and cars were not on the road. But what we have noticed with the smart meters, I don't know if Datin Laila, I'm sure mentioned it in her last talk also. Um, because in Malacca, the people have already had it for some time now, last 6 months to a year. And what we found is a lot of people during this time, actually during the COVID, because they were staying at home, they were not going out, they were working from home, learning from home, all online, baking a lot more, using a lot more energy. So, some of their bills actually went up. But for people in Malacca, actually, because they had their smart meters, they could actually check the energy usage, and they didn't have the same kind of you know phenomenon happen to them because they were actually able to manage it. So as you can see, this was actually a trial, and you saw for yourself that this really managed it, the energy usage for those kind of people. So the impact, I think, is what I think people will start to realize is, I hope, that based on this and the effect that it has had on the environment and the atmosphere, people will appreciate that we don't have time. We need to continue with this kind of behavior going forward, moving towards renewable, taking sustainable practices, managing energy usage. All these things count. Even the smallest things actually count. I don't know if you know, almost there's 99. I mean, I think we have a very high percentage of car owners in Malaysia again, and a lot of people have 2 car, 3 car households. So again, I mean, these are things to think about. Should we be moving into more electrical vehicles, electric mobility, etc.? I think it will be definitely, I hope, it will stir the economy towards that direction.
Yes, I think this is very well explained, especially on when you mentioned about human behaviors, especially when we were restricted, in a way that we can't drive. We have to stay at home, and this is where we know we are on the road lesser, and etc. So before I go into the next question, let's move a bit to human behavioral in terms of energy transition. So this is where sometimes correct me if I'm wrong, because sometimes we do forget, as much as we love the environment as well, but sometimes, we just take things a little bit granted, or, we just forget certain things, when we know that we try to reduce the usage of straw, but when we go to certain outlets, we just order and we sip in. So what are some of your opinion, madam, in terms of education, for example, education institutions, in terms of public, in terms of education institutions, what can we do in terms to actually instill this type of mindset among the children and the young people?
I think you brought up a very good point. I've done social enterprise before, and I've done work for companies like UNICEF, etc., DFID. And I'm sure you would agree with me, Dr. Lawrence, that
Yes.
Combination of factors. I think, first of all, I think children are very good in
Yes.
terms of driving change.
Yes.
Their minds are like sponges, and they absorb whatever they get. They're open to new ideas. It's difficult for people like us. Let's face it. We've had 40 years of behaving in a certain way. So
Right.
yes, I also have those metal straws, I also do. But you're so right. When I go to restaurants, sometimes I remember not to ask for the straw. Sometimes when they give me the straw, I like, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
But yes, not the right thing to do. Not the right thing to
Yeah.
do. Thank you for the reminder.
Yeah.
But you're right. I think children are the best change agents, because they tend to not only do they absorb and like a sponge, but they also go back and tell their parents, they tell their families. They're fantastic advocates. And particularly at that age, children are, whatever teacher says is like God's word and God's gospel.
Yes.
And teachers have such power. I wonder if teachers really understand how much power they have. over the children to put them in the right direction. So yes, I totally agree with you. That's a very good idea. So what we've actually been doing also, I think education is a very, very important part. Energy literacy is something also that we are working on typically. So we've been working with children. We're working with certain partnerships and collaborations to work with children to talk about this, how to do energy, savings, energy literacy. I think we've even worked with you, Dr. Lawrence, recently. We've done this exercise to
Sure.
get university students to think about energy transition, what they can do, their own projects, sustainability projects.
Yes.
I think this is a very, very powerful tool that we have here. But there's much more to do. So we are looking at collaboration and working with the Ministry of Education, how to possibly do more with children. You might have seen some of our work that we've done in the past. We've created videos, we've created pamphlets, all kinds of different things that we've done, games. In fact, we're also working with certain partners of ours to create an outlet where children can actually experience the energy transition and what we mean by energy. So we're working with two partners. I cannot divulge at this point of time. Once we're ready, we will talk about it. But I hope that children will also have an opportunity to come to this place and experience for themselves what it means. Because, for children, it's all about touching, feeling, experiencing so that it stays in their minds.
Yeah, you're so right, madam. Because everything starts from young. If there's any behavioral, any things that we need to teach, it will be when they are still young, right? So,
Yes.
madam, that will actually answered about human behavioral education. But what are some actually main what
Sorry,
are
Dr.
some,
Lawrence.
yeah,
Sorry,
what
I lost you.
it's okay. My next question is, what are some main challenges in energy transition?
There are quite a few because we're trying to replace a very long established system with a new system. The old system is based on fossil fuels and all the advances we got used to, like cheap coal, and we have power plants and heavy industry. We're all used to this. Now we have to change entirely towards a new system of supply, demand, etc. That's quite a few things to look at. So, A is the large scale adoption. I mean, I think we have a few people who have adopted, but how many people have really gone into adoption of the solar voltaic panels? I think we're still a long way from there. We are trying to promote. We have our own company called G Sparks, which is doing that rooftop solar. We also do solar farms, but I think it's still, and the prices actually have gone down. So we are also offering zero upfront cost, etc. But it's still something new for most people. It's like, why do I need to have panels on my roof, etc., etc. So we're also trying to get businesses on board also because a lot of businesses actually have their rooftops which are not being used. We're trying to explain to them, put on rooftop tops so that at least you can earn some extra revenue also by generating, let's say, and also for yourself, so you save. I think the other the challenge is, just to be honest, most renewable energy tends to be intermittent, which means that, for example, solar will only generate energy as long as the sun is there. So what do we do for the later part of the day when we don't have the sun? Which is exactly why I mentioned a little earlier the need for the establishment of the storage battery to start booming. That's one of the challenges we also have. The other thing I think we should also mention for the grid also, the grid right now, and we are working on it, has to be two-way. To allow for renewable energy, it has to also transfer. So the grid needs some investments and changes, which we are working on right now. That's another thing. Then like I mentioned before, the other challenge is electric mobility. So, how do we get more charging? Because a lot of people will say, and I think there's some challenges with the electric vehicles themselves because they really can't pick up on the speed that people are looking for. How far can you drive?
Correct.
And then I don't have a charging station. I'm in the middle of the road. What do I do?
Yeah.
Those kind of challenges. So I think there are still a few challenges left for us that we need to overcome. And these are just some of them. How do we match intelligent matching local demand with supply? How do we get the networks to talk to each other? How do we get the right land to do it on? There are a lot of these issues, and And for example, right now, still the upfront investment in people's minds we talk about. So these are just some of the challenges we still have moving forward into this new era that we are looking at. And I think also just to add to your point, it's not just about residential homes, etc. I think even industry and business needs to start seeing it as this is a very viable solution to my problems. I think they need to also see it that way. How to accept renewable because they've also based on it. Just to share with you one more thing, that
Yes.
a lot of people think that it's the energy industry only and sector which is causing most of the emissions. Um, well, while that is true, because they're actually in emissions for everybody else to have energy, but there are a lot of other players in the industry also who are responsible. For example, like I said, the heavy industry, the transport truck industry. So there are a lot of those players also that we need to help transition into new phase. So I think that's something else that is going to take a bit of time.
Definitely, everything takes a lot of effort, takes time. You need to work things out. But before we go to the next question, madam, this is something that I want to ask. Do you face resistance? Do you face people who are actually against this energy transition? And if there is, what are some of the methods that we can use to actually did you
Um,
get yeah? Did you you're able to get my question, madam?
could you repeat that one more time, please?
Yeah, I'm curious to know, are there people who are resistant towards this? And if there is, what are some of the things that we can do?
I haven't. Okay, so I think it's always about challenging the status quo, right?
Yes.
I wouldn't say it is blatant resistance. I think it's apathy to change, to something new, and something which is different. And coal is still around, you see. So, and there's natural gas also. So there's a lot of people who ask that. And like I mentioned before, it will take time, some investment, some change in attitude towards moving to a new structure altogether. So I do think it's not about, I wouldn't say it's resistance, but I would say, how do we help these people along in terms of showing them the alternatives? So I think for residential, for business, we have slightly different kind of ways of approaching it. I think for residential, if you can show them that, this will lead to, less burden on yourselves. It will lead to a planet which is better for your children. And it will lead to hopefully, lower cost. I think that will be the thing to play, to play to for residential. For business, I think it's all about revenues and business, etc. So again, I think if we can, I think the messaging is going to be very, very different, and I think it's very, very important how we reach out to them. I think if they can see people will change only if they see a benefit for them at the end of it. Right? It's not just changing for the heck of changing. There's a reason to change. Now, even though I give you some nice big statistics like 570,000 children died, whatever, but these are just statistics until they knock on your door, right? And that's kind of a little difficult to get people to be convinced. Oh yeah, it happened somewhere else, not my kid, not my house, not my neighborhood. But I think, like I said, if we can bring it down to the individual level and to the individual business level, I think that's what we're going to be having to do. So in terms of what we are now doing is we are trying to start off on energy literacy as part of the program that we're going to be doing. And I think that means a lot more engagement. So besides talking to children, etc., we do a lot more. We do actually do, but we're going to step that up a little bit more in terms of engagements with industry, with commercial players, with industrial houses, etc., to get that point across.
Yeah, I think
And
this is
hopefully, Dr. Lawrence, being on this show will help a little bit.
yes, definitely. And I've actually spoken to my team that even if those people who are not viewing now, because I think some of them could be working, we will definitely make sure that this video will be boosted and will be shared out to as many people as we can. So thank you so much for the input, madam. We will take one question from Tasmini, madam. So you mentioned about reaching out to children as well, right? Like we actually agree that everything starts young. But if we were to reach to the ground on educating our fellow Malaysians on energy transition, is it too late that if we learn about this? Is it already too late, or they are still good, in terms of getting awareness about this?
So actually, we're not just talking only to children, Dr. Lawrence. We also have engaged with university students.
Sure.
Last year, because I think it's very important for young people to think about their own future. I mean,
Yes.
I will be around for another 20 years. Okay, bye. They will be around for another hopefully 30 to 40 more years.
Sure.
So I would definitely like them to think about. So, the energy transition is not just about this, but it's also about policy.
Policy.
And I
Yeah.
would like to get them to think, because, a lot of it is also, so like I said, a lot of us have changed because we were forced to change. Let's admit it. A lot
Yes.
of us were forced to change.
Yeah.
So I remember when there were no plastic bags, I noticed that everybody still kept taking plastic bags until some of the stores actually said you are going to be charged for plastic bags. In tung behavior change, right?
Yes.
Then I think even this one that we're doing right now, with the cars, etc., because we're being forced to. So you don't go out so much, right? So sometimes about penalization, sometimes about incentivization. And I think that's another thing, part of it. How do we incentivize people to actually take on some of these things? So first of all, like I said, there are two ways of managing this. But also going back to Tas's question on no, we actually have. Last year we had a session where we invited SEDA and Deputy Minister, etc., to speak about renewables, energy transition, discuss about green energy. How do we bring green energy into the picture? What are their thoughts about it? What are the questions? We also had some of them, present some papers, etc., in terms of what they had. We did a quiz. We had Did You Know kind of series that we did. This was actually directed all towards university students. So, like I mentioned, I think this not campaign, this revolution has to happen right across everybody. It
Yeah.
has to happen across children, adults, families, university students, business, everyone. If we don't have and the policymakers, if we don't all engage in this conversation, this is not going to happen. And we don't have time. We don't have time. There are different ways of doing it. You can do it through energy efficiency or adopt alternative low carbon energy, or just reduce the unavoidable emissions, capture those. But all of these have to be done right now, and people need to know. I think
Yes.
a lot of people want to make a change, but they don't know what to do also. So that's also, there are simple tips. So last year, I think we also did a campaign along with ST on a whole range of energy tips. And well, some good news is that apparently it was noticed. People did notice it. But now I'm actually moving to the next stage. Knowing is one thing. But what I really want is behavioral change. I want people not just to know, but to actually do something about that. That I think is a critical point, really.
Yes. And I think what you said is right, madam. Especially even wearing a mask now. It's very about penal. We need to actually
As is being said right now, right? Anybody caught without a mask.
Yes, you need to actually pay. You are wearing it because you're afraid of paying 1,000 ringgit, and it's not because of being safe. So that you don't transmit anything to anybody. So I actually agree so much with what you said, madam. You
Hopefully
mentioned
over
about
time, and hopefully over time it becomes a habit.
yes. I think this is one way to actually
Mm,
forcefully let this human to actually adapt
right, right.
the kind of actions there. So, madam,
Absolutely.
you mentioned about energy efficiency. So,
Yeah.
reducing electrical consumption increases sustainability. So, how important is energy efficiency for energy transition?
So actually, energy efficiency, it has been found. Malaysia still has a potential of 10 to 25% energy savings that we can derive from energy efficiency initiatives. Can you
Okay.
imagine how much that is and how much saving that is? In next 3 years, if we can actually, raise certain few billions in GDP for this, that would be great for the economy. And we can also create jobs from that. I think it's very, very important. And these are very simple things that you can do, like simple things like switching off the lights when you leave the room, or, the aircon. I know of people who keep their aircons on, 4 aircons in the house on the whole day. Have a timer for the aircon, put it on 24 degrees Celsius, have a certain time that you set it on. Very simple things, don't use a dryer, wash your clothes in the sun, which is actually much better for it also. in terms of bacterial. Simple things like that you can do. And a lot of people don't know the things that actually use most of your consumption of energy are things which have motors, like your fish pond, your electrical kettle, heater, and for example your fridge, etc. These are the ones that actually consume the most, like the Koei, heaters and etc. So those are things you need to be careful of. I think people need to understand. Also, they need to understand. Sometimes people don't realize that if you have a very old appliance too, they can actually account for a lot of your energy loss. I spoke to a friend of mine, and he told me, suddenly it was like a penny dropped in his head, and he said, "Oh, I had never realized because I changed my 60-year-old fridge. Immediately, my electricity bill went down by 50%." So,
Oh,
old appliances also. So please do go for the 5-star appliances. Replace old appliances. These are very simple things. I mean, I know it's not the right time to be buying new things, but I haven't noticed that the buying spree has dropped completely.
yes.
But it's just, and I think in the long term, if you really care about the planet, if you really want to, reduce your energy consumption and reduce costs, I think that's something people can do. Simple little things that they can do.
I think this is exactly the next question that I want to raise from one of our viewers, Jana. So Jana actually asked, change is something, this word is big as well, and it requires a lot of teamwork, everybody's effort. But as a singular youth herself, what can they do, to play a part? Like mentioned, what Madam mentioned just now, simple things like getting, perhaps the right fridge, even getting the right, doing the right thing. So
That's a good question. I mean, if that was the case, I think that, Lawrence, nothing would change in the world, would it? If
yes,
all of us said nothing's going to change, then nothing would ever change, right, Jana? I think it starts from ourselves, right? And
yes.
then we start talking to the next person, talking to our friends, talking to the friends
Mm,
of our friends, and that's how, and it needs people like you, Jana, to help us. I think all of us are responsible for ourselves. Let's just first of all be responsible for ourselves. That's the first thing. And then we move on to the rest of it. The people we associate with, our family, our neighbors, our friends, and from then on to other people. I think change is hard, very hard, but I think it's worth it. This change is something that we need to do. So yes, I really believe in youth. I think when youth takes up something, it can make things happen. That's why we reach out to youth. That's why we're here. That's why we have done things with universities, because we believe that you can make the change.
yes. I think that's a very good word of encouragement, especially for young that says hello, good day, and this is a I'm a housewife. She mentioned she do housework regularly at home every day, so she wants to play a part as well. So what can she do?
Wow, I'm so impressed. I'm really impressed. Thank you so much. Well, I think, like I mentioned, I already mentioned a few things.
Yeah.
Try to use the sunlight for drying your clothes, switching off lights, and the aircon at a certain temperature, putting a timer. Um, and sometimes I was in this talking to some customers the other day, and they were mentioning that no, 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 I don't have problems at all. I don't put the aircon on, etc. Then I said, "You have a daughter at home? Does she put the aircon on?" Yes, she does. I always scold her all the time. So you see, it doesn't come to your mind necessarily. And I think look at your appliances. Are they old? Are they efficient or not? Look at those things. And of course, I think you would be welcoming the smart meter when it comes in, because then it will also help you to manage. If you have a fish pond, or if you have other appliances like the water heater, some people keep these switches on for all the time. Take out the plugs, the sockets when they're not in use. I think that's another thing. Just keep some of those things in mind and teach your children. As a housewife, I presume you have children too. Let them start young. I think that's the best thing you can do.
Correct.
Everyone listens to their mom. Mom is, again, very important in everyone's life. If mom says something, you can do that. And last of all, of course, is not that maybe you would need to speak to your husband about this, but do consider solar panels.
Yeah.
It will not only give you energy and generate energy, but also hopefully over time it may also lead to in the future revenue in the future.
Yeah. Thank you so much, madam. We are 50 minutes down the road. I don't think you realize that as well. I
No,
think
I
you
didn't.
We already
I was
15 minutes there. Yeah,
okay.
so I think this is a topic that I think requires more than 15 minutes to talk about. So, madam, before we end this, live interview, allow me to ask this very final question to you. So, actually, progress of Malaysia's, how would you evaluate the current progress of Malaysia's energy transition? And what are some of your words of encouragement to our fellow Malaysians, over this pandemic? What are the things that, some words for them? How can we be, hand in hand to be part of this together, not only with, of course, TNB, with my printers, with your neighbors, with your friends? What are some of the words of encouragement you can give to our friends as well?
I think I've already mentioned quite a few already, in
Yes,
terms of things that we can do. I think I'm giving some
sure.
tips, simple things that you can do. Influence your friends, please do so. Um, do consider these new things. I know they're new to consider, you know, and be open to it. I think just keep an open mind. That's the first thing I would
Open
ask you,
mind.
Peter.
Yes.
Keep an open mind, whether it's electric mobile mobility or cars, or whether it's solar panels or whether it's smart meters. And definitely, I think before we even get into that, those are, hardware adoption things.
Yes.
But at least start thinking about how can you be more sustainable in your behavior. So I'm not just going to talk about energy, even though that is my my sector. Definitely, you need to manage and monitor your energy, but even other things like waste recycling, waste
Yes.
management, recycling. I think these are coming up in the future. I have a great promise for waste to energy, because that's the next issue that's going to actually come up. What do we do with all the waste that is happening in all the landfills? It really
Yes.
scares me when I look at it. And all the oceans, microorganisms, plankton are dying, because of all this carbon emissions, etc. So I think if you're a future forward-looking person and you are, I mean, we should be optimistic. We know all these challenges. Because of the challenges, let's not be pessimistic. Let's do something about it. And I can tell you, we can do something. I am a big believer in the human spirit. The
Yes.
human spirit is amazing. It can do
Yes.
amazing things. And we
Yes.
have proved it, guys. We've proved it. We have come through this last 4 months and we're still here. And we're still here. Not only we here, we had a very low figure of deaths. I don't want to bring that up, but I think Malaysia has done very well in terms of managing this. So, I think kudos to all of us, kudos to all of you. And let's keep this going, because sustainability is a long journey, but it's a worthwhile journey.
Yes.
And just make the small little differences you can, influence the other people, keep an open mind. That's all I can say. And be optimistic always.
Yes.
Life is wonderful. Life is beautiful. What I do every morning is when I go on my balcony, I have these flowers. And I tell myself, it's despite all of this, the sky is still blue. The clouds are still there. They look beautiful. The flowers are still blooming. Life goes on.
Yes. Thank you so much, madam. I think that is kind of very strong word. I actually posted on my most recent Facebook post yesterday as well. I think COVID-19 has actually crushed a lot of people, but we just have to stay strong, and I believe we can walk out of this very soon. Thank you so much, madam, for today's
Thank you.
discussion about energy transition. Again, before we end, we always take a group photo. Now we have good photo over, online. So maybe just picture in best smile and peace, or any sign
Sure.
that you want.
Sure.
Over 3, 2, 1. All right, thank you so much, madam.
Thank you,
Sutapan,
everyone.
for spending your morning with us. Again, more than happy for TNB to share this video as well to all our viewers outside.
Thank you.
To our other friends, you can go to our YouTube channel and My Printer School of Life to actually look into this video again. And with that, we will end this interview. Thank you so much again,
Thank you.
madam, and we hope
Thank you,
that
Ratana.
see you
Thank you.
very
Thank
soon.
you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.